How's it hanging? Nice to meet you. I'm Nick, a solo game dev from Switzerland working on a Metroidvania game called Aestik. Last time we talked about the bosses of the game and caught up with most of the development so far. So this time I'll talk about the most recent changes and additions to the game. First though, I wanted to thank you once again for supporting this channel and the project. We're at over 200 subscribers now and it seems to keep growing, which is not only greatly motivating me to keep the development of the game going, but also its documentation in the form of this devlog series. So thanks. Let's get into the devlog itself. Today I'd like to talk about two things specifically. First, a few changes to player feedback, and second, a new enemy type. Let's start with the first one, player feedback. It's one of these terms game devs talk about all the time. To be clear, player feedback is not the kind of feedback you get when people think that your game is just a fucking Hollow Knight ripoff. It's actually the feedback players get from the game itself when they do certain things. It's closely related to the game feel, which is another one of these game dev terms. For example, when the player presses the jump button in Aestik, they'll not only see the player jumping, but also hear its sound effects, see some particle effects, and realize that they control the jump's height by holding the button down. By giving the player multiple sources of feedback, the game gives the action itself more impact and makes the player's monkey brain go yes. That's why some extra juice can be quite literally a game changer. So that's player feedback in a nutshell. With that out of the way, let's look at the changes I've made. Remember these kinda out of place particle effects that appeared when you hit the enemy? These bubble-like things that in a way looked like fighting game effects, but not necessarily fitting this game's aesthetics? Yeah, I removed them, for the most part at least. I really wasn't too happy with the looks as well as the lack of impact. I created them in the first place because I thought that some fancy effects would stand out in a positive way, but I realized that there's a good reason why so many games just make the sprites flash white on impact. It delivers the needed impact while not being out of place. So that's what I changed. I also created a new 2D animation that plays at the enemy's position when it gets hit, as well as making the game freeze for a moment to create more impact. I'm really happy with the outcome, and while the old particle effects are still playing when the player gets hit, I will change this eventually too. What's your opinion on this? I do believe that I've made the right call, but I'm sure that it's also a matter of taste in some way. Let's talk about the new enemy type. That's the juicy topic you actually came here for, isn't it? Creating enemies is quite an effort, but as I've mentioned in the previous devlog, I've created a system that streamlines at least the creation of the AI noticeably. That being said, I actually needed to make some changes to the system to improve it and make it more flexible. I guess you'll always find something to fix, but let's not rush things. My plan was to create an enemy that explodes when it's too close to the player. Thus the Misploder was born. It lives in a mist cave, and it explodes. Misploder. Get it? Anyway, since I already knew how to implement the code later, I started working on the design and animations first. I created a simple design that wouldn't take too long to animate. It's quite fashionable, isn't it? I needed to create 4 unique animations: the walk, idle, death, and explode. In total I drew 23 animation frames for the Misploder. That took a while, even with the simple design, but it still was much faster than the creation of this beer guard, for instance. When it was all finished, I realized that I had to create an actual explosion too. So that's what I did. It was actually quite fun. There aren't too many restrictions when it's about animation effects like these. You can kinda just go wild. It only took me about 2 hours to create the animation. With everything ready on the graphics side, I decided to put it all into Unity. An AI like the one I wanted to create sounds quite simple, but there are quite a few nuances to it. I've applied the patrol script that makes the enemy walk and stop in a natural way. There are also raycasts built in that can be used to detect the player. In this case, the enemy engages with the player when they're in front of it or above it. It then goes towards the player at a faster speed until it reaches the point when it should explode. If the player can kill the Misploder before it notices them, it drops a coin and won't explode. For this logic, I obviously needed to create a unique script, which was a really fast process since I didn't have to take things into account like health, grounded wall detection or stuff like that. I created a function that instantiates the explosion at a certain frame in the animation, and the implementation was finished. Mostly. I obviously didn't put any juice in yet. So I recorded some sound effects and added some screen shake, and now the job is done. I'm planning to create a function for a low pass filter to add even more impact, but that's for another day. So that's it for now. Thanks for tuning in. It's always a pleasure to see people enjoying this devlog series. While it takes quite some time to create these videos, I think that it's really worth the effort. Feel free to check out the other videos too, you won't regret it. And don't forget to leave your wife, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell.